Welcome to the Lemons and Pineapples podcast, the personal development podcast for folks who want more fulfillment, connection, purpose, and joy in life. I'm your host, Emma O'Brien, a no-nonsense coach, a seasoned entrepreneur, photographer, rescue dog mum, and happy life enthusiast. Each week on the podcast, I share tools, tips, and strategies, amazing guest interviews, and uplifting conversations that will help you improve all areas of your life. Let's dive in. Hi, folks. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 5 of the podcast. Today, my guest is Sam Shrosbree, and we're talking about how your gut microbiome affects your mood and how you can naturally boost your mental well-being. Sam is also going to be a regular guest on the show going forwards, which I'm really excited about. So as we're talking, if any particular questions come up that you would like to know more about, you are very welcome to send a text message at the top of the show notes and submit your questions. We're here to support you. First, a bit about my guest. Sam is a functional medicine health coach, a physiotherapist, and a therapeutic Pilates and yoga instructor. She's a firm believer that we all have the ability to optimize our health and vitality, and is passionate about guiding people towards living their happiest and healthiest lives. An entrepreneur and explorer, she's committed to finding and sharing the art of balanced, joyful living. Welcome to the podcast, Sam.
Thank you so much.
I'm looking forward to our conversation today. We're talking about gut microbiome, and I have, from my own training, limited knowledge of this. This is why we've got you here, because you're the expert on holistic well-being. Can you tell us a little bit more about exactly what the gut microbiome is?
So basically, your gut microbiome is this whole little forest of creatures that live within your gut. There's trillions and trillions of little viruses, bacteria, fungi, and other little microbiomes or microbiota. We actually have more little creatures living in our gut than we have cells in our body. So I actually heard a thing the other day that said we are more little bugs than we are cells in our body. And their job is basically to assimilate the food that we are bringing into our gut, help us digest it, and move it into the rest of the body. Thereby they also sort of regulate a whole lot of other processes and systems in our body.
Yeah, it's quite fascinating, really. I read, there's a book, I think it's called Gut, and it's Julia somebody. That's probably not very helpful for anybody. I'll see if I can find it and add it in the show notes. And she had, I think there was a Netflix kind of documentary around her book, which was quite interesting because they've got these lovely little animations of the gut microbiome and the little creatures that are in there, which I think just gives you a lovely visual of what's happening internally. I think I'm correct in saying that the gut is often referred to as the second brain because of all these little critters in there. Do I have that right?
I think actually people are going as far now to say that actually the gut is the first brain.
Wow.
And a lot of, even physio stuff that I've been studying, there's so much coming out about ailments, joint problems, things like that all originates in the guts. When we develop as from an embryo, your gut and your brain start off as the same little cells, and then they sort of grow outwards. So they pretty much one in the same system. And whatever's happening in your gut is going to affect your brain. I think there's more ways that your gut affects your brain than your brain can affect your gut.
Is it 90% of serotonin that originates from our gut?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what those little microbiomes do. Their job is to, I think, as they're digesting our food, their kind of waste products that come off of them are things like serotonin, the happy hormone. Very important, the constitution of what those little creatures in your gut are.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because I think most of us don't realize. I think Western medicine doesn't encourage the maintenance of a healthy digestive system. And I don't think there are many doctors that are out there talking about how what you eat influences your mental health. So obviously, if we've got 90% of our serotonin being manufactured in our gut, what we eat is going to have a huge influence on that. And I can remember, and I think, being at school, going to the nurse's room, and there was a big poster on the wall that said, "You are what you eat." And we essentially kind of are. If you're eating a load of crap, not you're going to be crap, but you're going to feel crap. But we forget, don't we? And so I would love to hear a little bit more from you about how what we actually eat affects our gut and how that in turn affects our mood and our mental well-being.
So yeah, basically, if you think of this as like a little sort of ecosystem of creatures that are living in your gut, it's, I suppose, like any population, there's going to be the good guys and the bad guys. And depending what you feed, that's going to thrive. So if you're feeding, say, even if we just go simply as the bacteria that make serotonin, if you're feeding them the food that they like, they're going to be manufacturing more and more serotonin, and you're going to get more and more serotonin through your body. Whereas if you're feeding the guys that like to live on sugar and all the processed and refined foods, then you're going to, and whatever, I don't even know what shit that is that they produce, but that's what you're going to get flooding through your system. So essentially, you want to eat food that feeds and grows the population of the good guys and diminishes the bad guys. There's also, just the constitution of certain foods that you eat is going to nourish things like the gut wall and all the other sort of physical components of the gut. So, like one of the biggest things that we're seeing in the physio world at the moment, even sort of mental health side, is that there's certain foods that damage that gut lining, and then what happens is you get something called leaky gut, which I think most people misinterpret, but it basically just means like your little sort of wall around this little community gets disrupted, and you get all sorts of toxins and waste products just like flooding into the rest of your system, rather than keeping it as a controlled and healthy environment.
Yeah. So tell me, two questions for you. What foods help us produce more serotonin, and what foods should we be avoiding? What are the things that damage that gut wall? And effectively, I imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, that when we've got things like leaky gut, so we've got toxins coming out of the gut wall into the rest of the body, I'm imagining you're going to feel brain fog, you're going to struggle to focus, you're going to feel tired. And I think this is the point where often we end up going to the doctor with these symptoms and being medicated for depression, or here's a tablet that's going to fix this symptom. And I think the work you and I do, and obviously we're going to be putting some workshops on in the new year as well for corporate folks, and I'm sure there'll be some offshoots for private workshops as well, to help people really start to listen to their bodies and understand what's happening and start listening to those symptoms, because symptoms are messages of something that's gone awry. And I think it's through no fault often of a GP's own. They're not taught this at medical school. I think it was this guts documentary that I watched from Julia's book. And they were saying that they've interviewed some doctors who were saying, well, we don't know anything about the gut microbiome because we're not taught at medical school. So this is all new information. So how are you supposed to treat patients if you don't have that training? So I'm going to let you answer my questions because I just completely sidetracked myself. But yeah, and I think
I love it.
To circle back to my point is, if we can start to listen to symptoms and then link them up with what have I been eating, however, what have I been doing? If you've been drinking loads of Coke and you're drinking lots of coffee and you're having lots of sugar, they're all going to have an impact. I'll allow you to answer the question now.
Yeah. feel like there's a lot to unpack there. Firstly, actually quite interesting. I was actually listening to a podcast on mental health this week, and it all came back down to diet. It was a mental health specialist, and everything basically came back down to diet. And she was saying 10 years ago, this was unheard of. So this is all quite new, groundbreaking stuff. And even the stuff I was saying that's coming out with joint pain in the physio world has probably been in the last year. It's all quite new that people are getting a new appreciation for these kinds of things. And yeah, I think the medical system is designed to sell people pharmaceuticals. Unfortunately, it's part of the capitalist world that we live in. I was actually talking to one of my colleagues whose husband is a GP this week about, we need to be considering gut health more in our patients. Even, a back pain is often not just a back pain. Like we need to be looking at them holistically and looking at their diet. And she told me that her GP husband has just come back from this big conference where they are acknowledging gut health, but they're treating it with fecal transplants.
Nice. Isn't that a bit of a last resort? I mean, that's kind of your absolute last resort, isn't it? To quite literally eat shit to feel better.
Absolutely. But, the frightening thing is I feel like a lot of times that's the way the world, doctors, people, it's like, is there a pill for this that I can take? And yeah, I think sometimes people say it's much easier to just eat some shit than actually go and figure out what I'm going to do myself. I was horrified. I was, anyway, so, I mean, that's an option.
Okay, that's an option.
But
what are some more gentle and less disgusting options that we could work with before? We jump straight
tastier
to
options.
Tastier options. Tell us about those.
Yeah, actually I heard a great catchphrase the other day. I mean, to simplify it, probably the best way is to try and eat from a farm and not from a factory. So, and again, it's hard. Your plants, your vegetables. I mean, we all know these things. Eat the rainbow, eat the kaleidoscope, eat lots of different colors, eat fiber, eat fruits and vegetables. But it's so much easier to just go and grab a bag of crisps or a highly processed sandwich. So it's you have to be quite sort of organized and diligent and things like that. And yeah, I think these things are not necessarily always that accessible. But I think the rule of thumb is try and eat as many colors as you can in a day. Your colors are going to come in the form of all those beautiful fresh fruits and vegetables, legumes, berries, nuts, seeds. I think you always want to be thinking of fiber. Fiber is what feeds your bacteria. They love fiber. I think the kind of goal or the aim is to try and eat at least 30 different fruits and vegetables every week. And all your spices and herbs, all of those things count as well. And then I think the biggest thing is to try and avoid is your highly processed foods. So things where you turn over the label and you see 20 different ingredients with words you can't pronounce. Sugar is horrible stuff. Obviously, sugar, if you're eating the fruit and things like that, is fine. And I think sugar, I feel like, is often just in treats, so it's a little bit easier to try and avoid those things. And then a little bit more controversial is kind of the dairies, the wheats, the glutens. And again, I think it's mostly because they're in those highly processed foods.
Yeah.
And it's also not to say never to eat those things, but they should be a once in a while treat. And most of the time is trying to focus on those fibrous, colorful fruit and veg.
Yes. So here's a question for you, because this is something that the more self-development work I've done, the more kind of introspective work I've done, the more I'm actually starting to listen to the vehicle that, my whatever is my spirit, my essence is living in. And I'm getting more in tune with how I'm feeling after I'm eating certain things. So I think that's one thing. If you are somebody like me who historically hasn't eaten well, I'm not. We went out for lunch, didn't we, a couple of weeks ago? Sam ordered a vegan rainbow salad and I had a margarita pizza. Um, so
With
I
basil
eat.
and tomatoes.
There was basil and tomatoes, absolutely, and it would have been a freshly made pizza. It wasn't a Dr. Utker pizza, but I eat like a 5-year old. So I'm trying to to expand that out a little bit and trying to cut back on sugar. And I think this brings us a little bit back to the leaky gut and the gut microbiome. I find myself craving sugar, and I believe from the bit of reading I've done about it, that is the little sugar creatures in my gut going, hello, we're quite reliant on this sugar and we really would like some. So, how can you start to manage that? Because I think a lot of our cravings for foods come from this gut microbiome. And if it isn't well trained,
Absolutely.
like mine obviously isn't because I eat like a 5-year old, how do we gently start to retrain it and override? Because those cravings are very, very powerful, I think. And
Mm.
I am terrible. So if it's in the cupboard, I will eat it. And I think the thing is really one can exercise some willpower and just don't buy the jelly tots. But I live in a house with somebody else who also eats quite a lot of sugar. So if it's there and I'm a little bit hungry, I'm going to go get it. So what's your suggestion for managing badly behaved gut microbiome creatures?
So I think it's also maybe not necessarily that they're so badly behaved. There's just more of the population is the sugar guys than the fruits and veggie guys. I mean, I historically come from a background of eating terribly, and it's been a slow transition to the point I can't imagine not eating like I eat now. Like, I mean, I love asking people what their death row meal would be, and I would still eat what I what I eat now because I love it so much. So it is definitely about sort of changing the population of the creatures that live there. The less you eat of something and the more you eat of something else, the more you'll grow up the good guys and sort of maybe fend off the bad guys. But I think it's maybe also just to start slowly. I think all of these things also become quite overwhelming.
Yeah.
When you think, oh God, I've got to do a complete overhaul of my diet, and that causes too much stress and anxiety, which is a whole nother aspect of the gut and the gut brain axis. So I think is maybe like once a week or once a day is to think about what is one thing I can add to my diet. So one new fruit or vegetable or herb or seed or nut, and one thing I can replace in my diet. So like instead of an ice cream, can you maybe make like a fruity sorbet? Or instead of a chocolate, can you have a dark chocolate or something like that? Yeah, and I think just start slowly, and you slowly start decreasing one part of the population and increasing another.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's great advice is, and the one thing also that I've been trying to do is be gentle with yourself with this. Is
Mm,
I
mm,
can be incredibly hard on myself. I think a lot of people can be very hard on themselves. And
mm.
like you say, it doesn't have to be a 180 polar opposite where you go from surviving on margarita Dr. Oetker pizzas to eating a salad every night. It's going to be really, really difficult and you're going to make it really hard for yourself. So like you said, add something and just taper it back. Because I think also you manage the cravings better if you gently, the poor sugar guys, you're expecting them to just die off.
So just to acknowledge that there are these whole other little creatures that are asking for these things. I think a lot of times people get quite hard on themselves and beat themselves up and why can't I just have more self-control or whatever. But if you've got this whole little other entity that's yelling at you until you feed it, it's really hard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing. So, and I love the metaphor you've given with that and the visuals with that of imagining that you've got a collection of creatures and just being gentle with them. And
Yeah.
firm but gentle. One thing I wanted to talk about when it comes to gut health is there might be people listening who are thinking, well, I have a really good diet and but I've still got digestive issues and I've still got gut issues. I think the thing both of us would say is it is always advisable to go and see a doctor if you have digestive issues. Don't
Absolutely.
listen to a podcast and be like, "Ooh, we're not diagnosing here." So always get
Hmm.
things checked if you're not sure. However, the one thing that will really abjectly influence your gut health is your stress levels. And I think for people, when you are in a fight or flight response a lot of the time, if you're stressed a lot of the time, all of the blood flow is directed to your limbs, it's directed to the emotional bit of your brain, so you can be reactive all the time. It comes away from your digestive system, and that will either completely slow your digestion down, or it will speed it up to the point that you've got horrible IBS. And I think if you are listening and you've got a good diet and you're having this happen, I would suggest starting to have a look at what your stress levels are like in life and where you can start to manage those. We touched on it, is we have this holistic body that it can work in harmony with all of its systems, but also if you've got energy diverted elsewhere, you're going to struggle with gut stuff too.
Absolutely. Even sometimes if people aren't struggling, I remember when I was doing my functional medicine training, they asked us an exam question: what is better, eating a salad or a healthy salad quickly, like wolfing it down, or mindfully eating a burger and chips? And the answer is mindfully eating the burger and chips. So you can have the best diet on the planet, but if you are in a state of stress, absolutely, the body still cannot assimilate it. So yeah, you said one thing is definitely the way our body diverts energy. So if you're in fight and flight, it's going to divert the energy to your heart and your limbs and get ready to run and hide. I mean, that's why they call it fight and flight versus rest and digest.
Yeah.
When you're in that calm state, you can digest your food better. There's more blood flow to the gut. And also what happens is we have this gut-brain connection that we spoke about, how we develop neurodevelopmentally. And there's kind of this little tether that connects the gut to the brain, which is one of your cranial nerves. The cranial nerves are all nerves that sit in the brain that control our parasympathetic nervous system, our rest and digest nervous system. And one of them, called the vagus nerve, which is Latin for wandering because it wanders out of the body, is kind of this little tether that connects it. And I always say the vagus nerve is almost like the brakes of your body. So if you are going full tilt, foot flat on the accelerator, it's the vagus nerve that actually stimulates the brakes and allows us to go into that rest and digest and actually absorb the food and get those nutrients to travel to our brain, which is then going to control the rest of the body. But as long as there's adrenaline pulsing through you and that vagus nerve is not being stimulated, it can't go to work doing its things. So you're literally just using juice to fire through life. And that stress it's a very complicated issue, and often I think the sort of the ground zero of addressing your gut health.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are going to be having an episode upcoming talking about polyvagal theory and how you can start to really work with this vagus nerve quite consciously to get your nervous system into a state of calm. Obviously, is something I teach with heart math. But I think it goes deeper than the heart math techniques. There's other things you can be doing to be working with the vagus nerve, which obviously you and I are going to talk about in an upcoming episode, which I'm excited about.
Amazing.
Because that's again, it's not new information, but it's information that's newly coming out to the public. And I think we're all starting to, as we all seek better health and longevity, it's very interesting. So and it's good to be talking about this and good to be making it available to people, because I think your body doesn't need to be a crazy mystery that you just kind of wander around in. You can use it and get in touch with it and listen to it and have a richer experience of life as a result.
Absolutely. Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
Sam, this has been awesome. I've really enjoyed talking to you and for what you've shared about gut microbiome. For folks who are listening and they'd like to get in touch with you to find out more about functional health coaching, how can they get in? What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
I think if you go to my website, www.zenroomwellness.com, and there's a little tab there. You can send me a message through there or link onto the socials from there. I'd love to hear from you.
Amazing. I'm going to put all of your links in the show notes. And like I said in the podcast as well, Sam and I are going to be running corporate workshops, both online and in person, for organizations who are really interested in bringing more holistic well-being to their employees and helping people get a better understanding of the link between physical and mental health. And obviously, if you can access eating better, less stress, you're going to be more focused, more productive. Life is actually going to be a bit easier, I think, when you're not fighting with all of your internal systems. So we're very excited about that. So if you want more information, you can get in touch and we'll be happy to chat to you.
Amazing. Thank you, Emma. This has been such a treat.
Thank you very much for joining me. It's been wonderful, and we'll Sam and I will see you again in a month's time for another joint holistic health podcast episode. So we will see you then. Thank you for listening to today's episode, folks, and I will see you same time next week. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you've enjoyed it, please leave me a 5-star rating and a review, and make sure you share this episode with a friend who you know will also enjoy it. I'd love to connect with you on Instagram. Please drop me a DM and say hi at Emma O'Brien Coach. And for more information about coaching with me, please head to my website, which is emmaobrien.coach.com.